Good afternoon. I am Steve Sempier, Outreach and Deputy Director of the Mississippi-Alabama Sea Grant Consortium and manager of the Sea Grant Oil Spill Science Outreach team that's hosting this event. Today, we're honored to have a panel discussion with two people who have served multiple leadership roles in their respective universities. During the past 10 years, they have also served as two Mississippi-based research board members for GoMRI. Dr. David Shaw is provost at Mississippi State University, and Dr. Denis Wiesenburg is professor of marine science at the University of Southern Mississippi. You can access more detailed biographies on the event webpage. So here's our first question. As members of the GoMRI Research Board, can you please speak to the rigors of the science conducted by GoMRI? Dr. Wiesenburg, why don't you start?
Sure. From the beginning of GoMRI, there was a clear expectation by the research board that the results of the work that was done would be published in peer-reviewed journals, and the data would be made widely available. And I think the weight of that expectation meant that we received only high-quality research proposals from both consortia and from individual scientists, those that were really capable of producing the best science. And then each proposal was peer reviewed. Then it was assessed by a panel of scientists before it even reached the research board for final consideration. And because of this rigorous review process, we were assured that the proposals that were selected for funding will really produce great science, and that science would be disseminated to the scientific community and to the public.
From my perspective, Dennis is really spot on with his answer. The board was just really scrupulous in enforcing the conflict of interest policy. And as a result, all of us were stepping in and out of the discussion continuously. After the first round of funding, in fact, Dennis and I joked with each other that probably the best indication of how scrupulous we were being was that a professor from Southern Miss and a professor from Mississippi State actually helped in the selection of a project from Ole Miss. And so I think Rita made a comment early on about the overall set of projects really being focused on trying to create this wonderful bouquet, which was kind of an ongoing joke within the board, about each project contributing to a holistic overall approach. And in the end, from my perspective, there was an amazing balance of projects that created this wonderful bouquet over the 10 years of GoMRI.
Thank you for providing that context. Our next question is, how does GoMRI support of research programs, researchers, and students help the state of Mississippi? Dr. Shaw, would you like to start?
Happy to. As was the case in the rest of the Gulf of Mexico states, research on the Gulf has been woefully inadequate compared to funding in other parts of the U.S. From the beginning, we saw the GoMRI funding as a really unique opportunity to address these deficiencies and thus strongly emphasize the most pressing research needs, not only in response to the spill, but also in overall priorities for Mississippi and the Gulf Coast states. The breadth and depth of research that has been benefited our state has been unparalleled in the history of the Gulf.
Yeah, and I would say while we compete in sports among the state universities, I was especially pleased that several Mississippi universities partnered to create consortia to compete for GoMRI funding. And the consortium process really required university researchers across the state to work together on common problems that were important not only to the Gulf of Mexico community, but to the citizens of the state of Mississippi as well. And the funded programs also allowed the training of a significant number of graduate students from multiple state universities. And these students got to know each other through their different research activities. And so the GoMRI research literally supported the education of the next generation of scientists in Mississippi. And those new scientists go out with a clear understanding of the current and future research needs in the Gulf of Mexico region.
Great. Thanks for those responses. Based on those responses, are there Mississippi-specific research findings that you are particularly excited about? Dr. Wiesenburg.
Um, yes, there were several, and I'll pick out one, and that is, fresh water flowing in the Mississippi estuaries has been an increasing concern over the years, and one of the efforts that was made during the oil spill to keep the oil offshore was to release water into the region. And so one Mississippi consortium focused its efforts on understanding the large influxes of fresh water into the Gulf of Mexico, both through natural processes like spring runoff and rivers, but also due to the intentional release of Mississippi River water through the Bonnie Carey spillway. That used to happen infrequently, and now it's happening much more often than in the past. And they learned that these large freshwater discharges might keep the oil offshore, but the effects were devastating for the oyster community.
Absolutely.
I certainly agree with Dennis about that being a really significant finding. I guess a couple of other things come to my mind in terms of significant research findings from Mississippi universities. Both of these actually came from the EcoGeek project that I mentioned a moment ago. The first was that the EcoGeek project was the first project that actually identified what we now commonly call marine snow. And there has been a tremendous amount of follow-on research that really has focused on those initial findings to really help identify both the creation and the ultimate resolution of marine snow. The second, and probably as a science geek, I think about the fact that they also were the first ones that identified several new species, and I guess in particular, several deepwater coral species that had never been known to exist prior to the EcoGeek project.
Excellent. That is exciting. We have one final question for this afternoon. Since you first received the call from the governor's office to join the GoMRI Research Board until now, what has that role meant to each of you personally? Dr. Shaw, would you like to start?
Happy to. Being a part of the creation and the implementation of GoMRI has really been one of the most personally rewarding experiences that I've had in my entire professional career. We took a monumental task on and quickly created a program that had both the rigor and the impact of the very highest order. We had a team on the board that had to work through a number of really, really difficult issues, but everyone was just so professional that in the end, we had the highest respect for each other and have developed friendships that will go far beyond the GoMRI program itself.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and when I received the notice that I would join the Gulf Research Board, I took a look at the people that were on the board, and I was just delighted I'd be joining this really impressive group of scientists that made up the research board. And the board was just a joy to work with. It had great people from many different disciplines and who worked together well. And it had an incredible support staff. It's probably the best support group I've ever worked with in my career. And I think David would agree with that. And during my career, I've worked on 5 different oil spills, from the Ixtoc well blowout off of Campeche, Mexico, to the Exxon Valdez oil spill in Prince William Sound. And for me, being able to contribute what I had learned from those previous spills to help assess the proposals that GoMRI received was really rewarding to me, because I felt like I was contributing, the knowledge to that effort, and it felt good. And I think I and all the research board really take great pride in, as David mentioned, the program that we produced, the incredible science that came from it, and especially the new generation of scientists that have been trained to carry the research forward. So it was overall incredibly rewarding, personally and professionally.
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you both so much for sharing the science and also your personal perspectives today. We appreciate that you represented Mississippi on the research board, and again, for sharing your insights and perspectives. Have a great day.
Okay, thank you.